Hey everyone, thanks for downloading episode 33 of the 40k Badcast. Before we begin, Campbell and I need to make an apology. In episode 31, we made fun of Reese Robin's voice, and we really shouldn't have done that. It was uncool and unfair, and in the future we will try harder to practice what we preach and adhere to the behavioral standards that we have for others. For this, we're sorry, and we hope you can forgive this transgression. We also hope that you enjoy episode 33 of the 40k Badcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 33 of the 40k Badcast. My name is Dan Boyd, and I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful partner. I've got it written down here, Manbull McBeeflin. Manbull, how you doing?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Man.
Ooh.
See, the problem is I actually grew up in cow country, so I feel like you're really representing my heritage here.
Oh, yeah, that's really what I want to do with this name bit. This stupid fucking name bit we do every show. Yeah, man. It's happening. We're here. We're doing it. Episode 33. Or Dirty Tree, as you called it.
Yeah. I was supposed to have a dirty tree joke for this one. God damn it.
Well, maybe later.
Oh, well.
All right, let's get into the aspects here. Campbell, have you managed any hobby progress lately?
Ooh, actually, yes. So the Knight Gallant, which I built, I think I had it built last time.
The one true knight.
Yes, Loretta Rexus and the Adamant Fury. The first Adamant Fury, not the second Adamant Fury.
The second one.
Yeah, I have painted that knight completely. I'm super thrilled with how it came out. It is down to the last couple transfers that just came in the mail today, which are like the big Aquila, whatever, how you ever pronounce it, wings that came with the Renegade box set. And those are going to be going on there at some point today. Now that's actually nice enough that I can varnish this big little model on my desk right here. Fantastic. But I also got around to building the Knight Dominus, which, if you recall, is Cassandra Lacar piloting the Hierophant of Woe. And it is, seriously, this is one of the most cleverly designed kits I've ever built. Like, as I was building it, I was just going, ooh, because, all right, here's the thing. It is two of the exact same sprue and then one special sprue for, in this case, the Knight Valiant, or in the other case, the Knight not harpoon gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like every single piece, it shows you in the instructions, like, okay, you just build this and then you just notch it into this part. It says like, each piece will have like two notches and you'll put it in one for the left side and one for the right side. And I'm just wondering, like, how do they do this? And the entire kit went together like a dream. It came with absolutely no spare parts whatsoever. Again, just like the armatures, save for the missile racks or the cannons on the shoulders, depending which one you feel like putting up there.
What'd you go with?
It doesn't really matter which ones you go with because they have these mounting lugs and they have a little peg that sits into each one. So I just left them all off and I'll pop them in depending on the game I'm going to do.
Ooh.
But yeah, it was really fun to build. I cannot overstate how fun this model was to fucking build.
Around the state, interstate.
But I also had a lot of fun doing up the base with the last few nights with both this guy and the Gallant, because I've never done like rubble piles, and I just chopped up a bunch of old scenery sprues, made some bricks out of random sprue bits, chopped up cork, just whatever garbage I had lying around my bits box to make really cool piles of rubble for these guys to be trudging through.
This is like the exact opposite of my hobby progress experience in the last 2 weeks. Like,
well, what have you been up to?
Everything you've been talking about. So, the first thing, I finished my Primaris Chaplain, got him painted up. I haven't taken pictures of him yet because I was extremely excited to get into my next project, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the Primaris Chaplain is awesome. It's a great model. Painting it was a ton of fun. He's a lot more colorful than the rest of my army, where he's got a lot of that red and paperish, bonish color on him. So it's a lot more colorful. Really, really great model. I honestly don't see myself using him a whole lot in games, which is too bad because he looks so cool. But I am very, very happy with how it came out. But my second project, and the reason why I didn't take any pictures, because right after I finished with Chaplain, I wanted to get into my Astraeus.
The resin albatross has landed.
The resin albatross is here. My large resin son is here. He is delivered. He is about 6.7 pounds and 12 inches long.
Jesus Christ.
And I got to tell you, man, like, you're talking about how nice that Knight Dominus kit is. The Astraeus is not the worst Forge World kit I've ever put together, but it's nowhere near the quality of GW plastic kits.
Well, I feel also with Forge World kits, the bigger they are, the more prone they are to warping and other similar problems to that. So because
fortunately for me, the Astraeus is mostly huge blocks of resin. Like there's not a whole lot of warping that could happen to these giant blocks of resin. They'd melt before they warped, which is good and bad. Good meaning that you don't have to do too much fixing. Bad they're fucking heavy as shit. The thing weighs almost 7 pounds. I weighed it. I got on the scale and was immediately disappointed by the result on the scale. And then I got off the scale, picked up the Astraeus, got back on the scale, and it was 7 pounds more. So that thing actually, okay, so putting together Forge World stuff is way different than putting together plastic kits. I know the independent characters did a whole episode on putting together big Forge World models, but my experience was similar to what they've had to go through. I did have to do some bending and refitting parts of the repulsor plates on the side. I had to get those so they wouldn't, because they were all just a tiny bit bent. And so the way you do that is actually pretty easy. I just boiled water, had a pot of boiling water, and then a bowl full of ice water, and you just drop the piece you want in the boiling water for about 20 seconds. You get your tongs and you pull it out, and then you straighten it, and then while you're straightening it, still holding it, you just dunk it in the cold water. And after a couple seconds, it sets again.
Yeah, that's all it takes. I have an electric tea kettle I use for that sort of thing.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I've probably used it more to straighten out Forge World bits than to actually make tea, but it's more my fiance's thing than mine generally. But it's helpful to use that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I did have to straighten out those repulsor plates, had to straighten out those long cannons on it. Oh man, it was so funny. I was putting it together, which is, we'll get to that in a moment. But I missed straightening out the heavy stubber on the turret.
Oh no!
And I was about to fit it onto the thing, and it looked just so sad and limp. It had a slight downward curve to it.
It's like a slice of New York style pizza just dangling out there.
It was a very flaccid heavy stubber.
More stub than heavy.
Nice. Trimming that thing was a total pain in the ass. I cut the fuck out of 4 of my only 10 fingers. That's listeners, that's 40%. It's nearly half of my fingers with my extremely sharp modeling knife trying to cut these pieces of flash off and shape it so it would fit together. And even when I was done, there were still a ton of gaps. So I had to spend time filling gaps with green stuff. But fortunately, the Astraeus, the way it is built and the way it's going to sit on the table is like anything on the bottom you're never going to see. So I didn't fill any gaps on the bottom.
Ooh.
And then I primed it black, and it turned out the black primer hid all the gaps anyways.
Nice.
You just don't fucking see them because the whole thing is black. So it went together. It wasn't too difficult. The worst Forge World model I ever had to build was that stupid fucking Dreadnought drop pod. Which, listeners, if you take one thing from this podcast, it's never buy a Dreadnought drop pod from Forge World. They're a pain in the ass. They're not worth it. Don't do it.
Even the plastic drop pod isn't that fun to put together.
It's a fucking pain in the ass too. But the Astraeus wasn't too bad. It took a while because you got to be patient with resin. It took me like 3 days to actually get the whole thing built, and it's not built completely because I am batch painting it and I'm painting it in parts. Like I painted all the repulsor plates and the metal stuff. I sprayed them all with lead belcher. And I'm actually finished them the other night, or last night. Nice. I just washed them with Null Oil and dry brushed them with Necron Compound, and they look fine.
Yeah, that's all you gotta do.
And right now I'm working on the sponsons and the turrets because I can't work on them all at once, the whole thing at once, because the Astraeus body takes up my whole workspace. And there's not really anywhere to put it. So I'm gonna do that last. And I've started. I did the first few base coats on those pieces, so I'm getting there, man. It's gonna be a struggle. It's gonna. Gosh, you guys aren't gonna hear me go insane because of Edge highlighting this week or this show, but in 2 weeks, it very well might be the case that I am a rambling madman because of this stupid fucking resin albatross I have.
I mean, no one's happy if they're edging for that long.
Oh, man. I wonder if our listeners know what that means. Anyways, you play any games?
Actually, yes. My Panoply of Honor, or whatever the fuck you'd call it, my knights, they actually got to play in their first game this weekend. Or not this weekend, last weekend? Whenever. Time is a construct. It doesn't fucking matter. Recently. So I had not built my Valiant yet. So this was just my Gallant, my Crusader, my 4 Armigers, like 40 Guardsmen, and a Leman Russ. So it's more or less a preview of what I plan on bringing to Nova. Yeah. Whether or not I'll actually get that special guard regiment done for Nova is very up in the air.
No, it's not. You promised you'd do it.
I promise I'd do it. Shit.
You said you'd do it. You said
I don't want to disappoint the Warhams.
You said you'd have 3 Guardsman squads, a company commander, and a primary psyker done by Nova.
Yeah, I did. God, I'm really bad at making promises. Oh, well. All right, I'm only as good as my word, so hopefully I'm at least mediocre.
Sorry, Anne. Your fiancé is ours.
Oh, I'm married to the hobby. Anyway, my notes in this game just say in all caps, so noble, so gallant. And that's more or less what it was. So I played against my friend Matt Lovett. We and I, Jesus Christ. We played a while ago. He was the one who had the Custodes army where we only finished like half a game.
Custodes.
He came over to my house. He brought a case of Harpoon IPA in honor of my Knight Valiant, which is delightful on a hot summer day like it was. We had all the windows and doors open because of how fucking hot it was, and I don't have central air right now. But I told you what I brought. He brought about 1,500 points with Belisarius Call, Azrael, a bunch of Dark Angels, and a bunch of AdMech guys. And I got first turn. I did not read my stratagems, so I only knew what I'd basically read through, quick Warhammer community things and stuff like that. So I ended up losing my Knight Gallant turn 1 because I ran it right into his line, and I didn't use the full tilt stratagem to actually charge after running. So it just kind of sat there and got blown up. But
that's right, because it can move, assault, and charge, right?
We can move, assault, and charge? Wow, Dan, that's really versatile.
No, like in the same phase.
You can move, run, and charge, yes. I think the real reason that she got blown up, though, is because she wasn't done being painted yet. It was just the skeleton. And no wonder.
No armor plates.
No armor plates. So she just got blown up turn 1 by a bunch of Ravenwing Knights and Hellblasters, which there's like those Dark Angel stratagems that crank up their damage by 1, and he had like a bubble with Azrael and a Ravenwing Lieutenant, so it was like rerolling 1s to hit, rerolling 1s to wound, and doing 3 damage per shot. And even with like the Rotate Ion Shield stratagem, it was not going to be good for my Knights. So I was able to kind of divert my firepower a bit that way. Meanwhile, my Helverins shot down his Dark Shroud turn 1. My Crusader started mowing down stuff because it took the Gatling cannon that can deal a shitload of mortal wounds with the Warlord trait or whatever. Ooh. And I think my favorite parts was when I ran up with my 2 Armiger Warglaves. One got blowed up, and the other one charged Belisarius Call and murdered him in single combat, and then just kept stomping around through the back of the field. So it was... My guard did fucking nothing. It was...
they're just there to provide command point.
Exactly. And I honestly think because of how command point hungry this army is, I might have to do the cheesier thing and take like Kurov's Aquila or Aquila... whatever.
Yeah, Kurov's and Grand Strategist as your yeah.
I feel kind of bad about it, but man, like I just burned through command points. But after playing the wet noodle that is Codex Space Marines for so long, it was like, oh, this is what Warhammer is supposed to feel like. This is what it feels like to be effective. I'm not winning in spite of my Codex. I'm winning because of it. And it felt kind of one-sided, I'll be honest. Like, I didn't totally run roughshod over him, but I did knock his forces down pretty badly when we called it on turn 3 or 4, because it was like a open war thing and the objective would fall down from space and it landed in my backfield behind my guard gun line, behind my Helverins, and it was like, we probably could have just re-rolled it, but the writing was kind of on the wall at that point. That being said, Matt's a great dude. Pleasure to play him. Hopefully next time we can get a little more of an even outing, but it was fun to hang out and play a nice chilled out game, have a I'd say a couple beers, but that's underselling it. And nice way to spend a summer weekend. How about you?
I did not play any games.
Shameful.
I've got one planned with my friend Gary coming up on Saturday. It's Thursday, the 12th of July as we record this, but I've got one coming up, but I have not had time to play any games.
It happens to a lot of us.
I could have played on last Monday, but I wanted to work on my Astraeus. So I was thinking about, you said you might end up taking Grand Strategist and Kurovs with your Knights and Guard, and I don't know, man. That seems pretty...
That's the thing. It's getting a little too shitty, and I think that's why I'm not going to do it. But
because, like, I can understand, like, if you come to Nova with your Knights and your House Guard of the Knights, like, I could see, like, your leader. What's her name?
In the big ol' Valiant.
Yeah, is that the leader of your Knight group or whatever?
Yeah, that's Cassandra Lakar.
Cassandra Lakar. I would imagine that she would have to be the warlord, wouldn't she?
Yeah, well, in the game I played, my old Knight Crusader was the warlord, and they had the warlord trait that makes it so 6s cause mortal wounds in addition to their other damage, which on a Gatling cannon is fucking choice.
That might be fucking choice on that flamer too.
I don't think I've caused that many mortal wounds in my entire 40k career.
That's fucking rad. That sounds like a lot of fun, man. I'm glad you're really enjoying the Knights.
Yeah, it is. You said last week I'm slowly becoming Duncan Rhodes, and I understand the appeal now. They're a fun army to play.
Maximum gallantry. All right, let's move on to new stuff. And, well, they are, in this month of July, at the end of the month, they're going to release Kill Team, Campbell.
Yeah, they are.
Which I am very interested in, as I think they are attempting to make it a much more like balanced Shadespire-esque game.
Well, it's the Shadespire team that's working on it, so I think that is their goal. They are probably the designers there with the best eye on balance and even playing field, so I think it's going to be pretty solid.
And we've been hearing a lot about it with they've been releasing the faction focuses or whatever for each for all the factions and what units you can use as part of that faction for your Kill Team games. And oh boy, the nerd tears are flowing with these announcements.
Yeah, I understand. All right, so basically, if you don't know, there's only like half a dozen at most units per team they've shown off. So it's like, a Space Marine's good, a Tactical Marine, a Scout, and a Primaris Marine or something like that. And some people say, what about Terminators, what about Bikers, what about Assault Marines, etc., etc., etc. And I get with them wanting to keep it as balanced as possible, keeping the sample sizes fairly small. I get that. I'm totally behind that. And then because it's supposed to be kind of a modular, customizable Necromunda-esque game, they want to focus it mostly on plastic kits, with a few exceptions like Orc Commandos, which you can frankly convert pretty easily anyway. Like most of my Blood Axe Commandos are plastic conversions or using the Forge World bits, which I hope they still sell. They're great bits if they do.
As soon as they released what units you could use for Imperial Guard, everybody was like, what? No Ogrins? You gotta be fucking kidding me.
No Rough Riders? Fuck this shit.
Oh, man, because what's stealthier than anything is a fucking giant Ogren or a dude on a horse.
I'm pretty sure Silent Horse is a boss in Metal Gear Solid 3, but I may be forgetting this.
Silent Horse. Was it HOARSE? Because I think that would be actually pretty funny.
And then he reads your memory card and tells you you've been playing too much Castlevania. But the Kill Team box set is coming with some Sector Imperialis terrain, which looks pretty fucking dope.
No, it's new terrain.
Yeah, it's called Sector Imperialis.
Oh, okay. I thought I'm thinking of Sector Mechanicus.
Sector Mechanicus, branding.
This is what happens when I'm an idiot and you're not, so.
A rare moment. But I guess
it's brand new terrain. It looks fucking good.
Yeah, it looks a lot more industrial, I think, from the old stuff, and a little less gothic and boxier than the Seas Death Train, which is already fairly boxy, but it looks super detailed. It's bigger, so 32 millimeter, 60 millimeter bases work better. It's taller. Like, it's funny. I watched they had a little design video. It was like a 2-minute long video with the chief head of marketing Gubbins. Like, his title's hilarious. And he basically just acknowledges that scale creep is a real thing. And he's like, yeah, it's a thing that happens. So we made it bigger. And I'm totally down with that. It's made to be completely interchangeable with the Sector Mechanicus stuff. I think it looks dope. I don't think that's controversial at all to say, though.
Right. I'm very excited. I think the game mat idea for Kill Team. I'm honestly not a huge fan of it. They were selling Kill Team is played on I think it's supposed to be like a 22 by 30 inch little game mat that they're packaging with the box. Not a huge fan of that. I don't really know why they went with the mat instead of the old 2x2 or 4x4 or whatever, but
I think I do know why.
Because they want to sell as many mats as possible.
Yes, but also like the Moonbase Crisis and the equivalent Shattered Hollow Hearth, whatever Age of Sigmar set with the cardboard boards.
Yeah.
I think that's the size of one of the two boards in each of those. That has something to do with the size of the packaging that Games Workshop sells their stuff in. Like they only have so many box sizes they use. I think that's just the size that works with it, frankly. And it also probably is because it's a game size you can play on a coffee table or on a picnic table, lunch table, whatever. Like it's lunch table. That's something you should shop for at IKEA. Either way, it's a smaller table size that you can fit in more places. That's the idea.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of really close fights in those confines too.
The term is fun, comfortably close. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to be like, remember Mordheim? Did you ever play Mordheim?
I did once at Historicon in like 1999, so I do not remember it very well.
Well, there was an established way to win Mordheim. It was take elves and take a bunch of bows. And then it was just like sit in the back and fucking shoot everybody, which is a way to play that game that was hard to deal with if you wanted to play a team or a warband that didn't have a lot of missile weapons.
Elven bullshit never changes. Yeah. That being said, there is also another exciting thing coming out that I think probably was announced before we recorded last time, but wasn't really on our radar at the time, which is Warhammer 40,000 Monopoly. Because the only thing more grimdark than the 41st millennium is this friendship-destroying capitalism simulator. I don't really have any strong opinions aside from I want to be the car. That's the thing that's happening for reasons.
I do not know if I've ever completed a game of Monopoly.
I have lost to my sister every time we played Monopoly for, the first 25 years I was on this planet, and then I beat her once, and I never need to play it again. I've proven that gods can bleed, and I never need to play it again.
That's a game that I think actually is kind of a lot like Warhammer 40,000 in some respects, in that it can go bad early for somebody, and then it's just like, well, this game sucks.
I thought you were going to say because whoever has the most money wins.
That's also true.
Yep.
Well, I don't know. Maybe not so much nowadays, but definitely back in 7th. That was that was the way to go. Also, things that are happening is the Adepticon room block went on sale and then immediately sold out.
It was like 12 hours before it was out of blocks or whatever.
Yeah. Well, we got a room, so we're going to be there. Adepticon 2019, the Badcast will be back to Chicago.
Hit me up, Bad Fam.
Outside Chicago. I was getting in an argument with some of the guys on one of the group chats that I'm in about how Schaumburg, Illinois is like 25 miles outside of downtown Chicago. Mm-hmm. And like 25 miles outside of downtown anything on the East Coast is like a different state.
Yeah.
whereas that, like, Schaumburg is still part of Chicago. It's like, wow, cool.
Yeah, because even though there's a dozen towns in and around Boston, more than a dozen that make up the Boston area, if you say you're from Boston, you're still, even if you're in like Waltham, you're still within like 6 miles.
Yeah, I was looking at like what's 25 miles outside of DC? Oh yeah, Chantilly. Yeah, you can't confuse that with DC, but what are you gonna do? Whew. All right, so let's move on to our first topic of conversation today, and I'm calling it the world of Lords of War.
Worlds of Lordcraft.
So we're both working on Lords of War right now in our hobby progress. I'm working on my Astreus, you're working on your Knight Dominus, and we wanted to talk about, well, what we like about them so much. I've had my first Lord of War was a Shadow Sword that I built, probably 2015.
Yeah.
Because I went to Nova in 2014, and the narrative, they're allowing super heavies. This was back before the Lord of War slot was a thing. They're allowing super heavies, and every game I played, there was a super heavy in it, and I got stomped. And I was like, fuck this. I'm making a Shadow Sword. I know what will kill these stupid fucking super heavies, and it's a goddamn Shadow Sword.
I love that, like, sort of like friend group war of escalation sort of thing.
Yeah, and well, I brought my Shadow Sword after that to the Philly Apocalypse right after that, and it did very well.
Well, my first was also a Shadow Sword, and I got tennis elbow from dry brushing it. So, Lords of War typically refers to super heavies, which are really fucking big things. It can mean giant robots, giant tanks, giant monsters, what have you. And they've been in the game in one way or another since the early 90s, with rules for Titans appearing as early as like 1991 in a 40k fanzine called Inquisitor Magazine, which I would love to track down issues. So if you have any, hit me up. But they generally...
If you have them, Dylan, hit us up.
Well, he has pretty much every other old super heavy. So last time I was over his house, he was painting the armor cast Reaver. Yeah, he was. So super heavies are massive units with the firepower, ability to take out whole squads of tanks and infantry at a time. And nowadays refers to things like Magnus the Red and Reboot Gilman as well. But going back, let's just stick it under the old purview of super heavies. So the Collecting Citadel Miniatures Wiki, which is a fantastic resource, is this great article on resin vehicle models that goes into this stuff more in detail. But in the early 90s, like around second edition, you had companies like Armorcast, Epicast, and a different Forge World, separate from the Forge World we know, making upscaled versions of Epic models for 40k, which included some early passes at like Eldar Wave Serpents and such, but also was Warhounds, Reaver Titans, Baneblade variants, and other super heavies. And you think your Astraeus is fucking heavy? These things are so big and so not well engineered that they would have like washers and bolts inside them to secure them. Like I'm talking like a lug nut on the inside of one of these things. That's how you secure the waist join to the torso on the old Warhound Titan. Wow. And it's absolutely insane. And because they were upscaled versions of second edition, or not even second edition models, epic models, which for the uninitiated are like the size of your thumbnail for a tank, the detail level on them was not so good.
We'll go with minimal.
Yeah, I do have the Shadow Sword from back then. I got it from a goon years ago, and I've never actually painted the damn thing, but it's fun to bring out because like the rivets on it, each rivet on that thing is like the size of a thumbtack.
It's probably what they were.
Actually, probably was.
Yeah, those things. I remember those things. They're all like, I mean, I'm sure for the early 90s, they were like people were like, whoa, these are so cool. But you compare them to the kits today, and they are hot fucking garbage.
Well, yeah, because like if you compare like a 90s Space Marine model to a modern Space Marine model, you're like, all right, I see it. He's still got like rivets and panel lines. Like they're not, you see the evolution. It's different clearly, but it's not that drastic. But with these, it's night and day.
Like the armor cast Warhound versus the current Warhound. Actually, no, because the Warhound still has that dog look, but the Reaver, the old armor cast Reaver is just god awful.
It's so soft. It's so cute. That being, all right, did you ever see any of these things new in box, like the packaging for them?
No.
All right, the package design for them is fucking hysterical because like the old boxes, like the old like red era GW boxes, whatever, really bright and colorful and had painted pictures of the models, usually on like a grass flocked mat against a blue to white gradient background. Like it is that old look. And the packages for these look like they were basically garage kits because all these companies were not actually affiliated with Games Workshop. They weren't subsidiaries. They were just operating under contract. And the boxes for these are like plain white cardboard boxes with what look like black and white like photocopies from Kinko's over it with a picture of the model and the text on them saying what they are. And the old Tyranid ones will say like, you know, Hierophant Bio Titan, and it's in like the Cramps logo font. It is charming. It is not the Games Workshop aesthetic as you know it today. It is not the company practices you know it today, but it's fun. The only GW produced super heavy from back then was the Metal Thunderhawk gunship.
Oh my god. I remember the White Dwarf where they put that out, and it was like $700. And I don't know how much this fucking thing weighed. I don't know how you would put it together and keep it together.
You need a scaffolding system of some sort, or else it will collapse under its own weight.
But I knew that they sent it in like this nice like wooden box with a big fucking like Aquila like burned onto the top. Like it was a whole fucking deal, man.
Yeah. Does it surprise you one bit that Dylan has one in the box?
No, it doesn't surprise me. That guy's got literally fucking everything. Yeah, he's the old Hammer King.
Yeah, so if you do want to, Yeah, if you do want to see one of those, the old 3rd edition Space Marine Codex, which, easily available, everyone has one, right? Has a bunch of them. It was created for display at Games Day. So this is kind of the evolution of this. And in like 1998, late 90s, Forge World as we know it started, and they started doing like busts and terrain models. And I think their first super heavy vehicle, don't quote me on this, was the Baneblade.
I think so too, actually. I have that in my notes, that they started out with the Baneblade, and then shortly after that, the Shadow Sword.
Yeah, and some other variants. There was like an interior detailing kit and all this stuff. And we're not going to go release by release here with what Forge World has made, because they've made more super heavies than there are days in the year. But you started seeing them come out. You started seeing them as painted things, but you weren't seeing these models in regular games.
No,
like if you go,
they weren't allowed in regular games.
No, it was permission only.
Right. You'd have to. They had a not necessarily a rule, but the thing to do, what was fashionable at least, was you'd have to ask your opponent, like, hey, can I use Forge World units? And if they said no, then that was supposed to be it. You weren't allowed to use your Baneblade.
And this was also the same time when it was like, hey, can I use Abaddon or Marnius Calgar? And it was also permission only, was the general sort of...
Oh, with the special characters, yeah.
Yeah, that was the social contract. And a lot of them even had like points values where you couldn't use a character under this points value or whatever.
Well, I think after that, though, so Forge World comes out in the late 90s and starts putting out their kits, and you don't see a whole lot of them at first because they're expensive and they're rare, honestly. Like, they're just not out there that much.
They're basically GW produced garage kits, really. Like, if you think it's a small operation now, it was tiny back then.
But I think in Warhammer 40k 5th edition is when they brought out Apocalypse.
It was end of 4th, I think.
End of 4th, okay.
Yeah.
They brought out Apocalypse, which was rules for using super heavies in your games. Now, you were not playing a game of 40k. You were playing a game of Apocalypse 40k. So it was still like separate. Like super heavies were separate from regular Warhammer 40,000.
Right.
But there were rules and missions and styles for these huge battles that would use these giant super heavies in games. In a book itself called Apocalypse.
Yeah, and a sequel called Apocalypse Reloaded. But just like this is still a game mode now, so clearly, and they'd always had mega battles during games days, and some stores would do mega battles, but this kind of consolidated the rules for them into a slightly more streamlined format. And honestly, the Apocalypse book, if you've read it, a lot of it isn't really rules. It's kind of like how to herd kittens and corral your nerd friends to make a game day happen. Like, that's a good portion of the book. It's actually pretty solid reading, even if it's not for a version of the game that's still supported.
Well, our listeners have heard us talk about Apocalypse a few times, and the most important thing you can do with an Apocalypse game is have it well organized.
Yeah, because if you don't, it's just going to be an absolute clusterfuck.
Yeah, they take forever. It's a long day.
But that came out. When that came out, you also started seeing the plastic releases of the Baneblade and the Stompa. So you started getting these plastic super heavies in there too, and they kind of came out along with as sort of a cross marketing sort of push. But the problem is, people would buy like one if they were really into Apocalypse, or they'd buy it and never use it, which like the Shadow Sword I got because a friend of mine bought it when it came out and never fucking built it because he's like, I don't play Apocalypse. I just thought it looked cool, but I don't want to waste my time using something I can't use. So the biggest problem with all the super heavies, whether it was these plastic kits or the Forge World ones, is people just weren't really using them. They were not normal things you'd see in a game, only in special scenarios or special types of the game like Apocalypse. That is until they tried to push that again in 2010s, like I think late 5th edition, maybe early 6th. Late 5th, yeah, with Spearhead, which was basically built around tank battles and such.
Yeah, I think Spearhead was originally done as part of White Dwarf.
It was the only thing of substance in White Dwarf for like that year.
And I remember this because I was in the hobby at this point. It was before I took my break of my 6th edition break, where I didn't like play at all during 6th edition's run. And I remember playing some games with Spearhead, and it was fun. It was good. It was an excuse to bring out your big tanks or your just tanks. There wasn't really a force org chart involved, and if there was, it was just heavy support and tanks everywhere. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of fun. It was good. But after that, I think in 7th edition, they released Stronghold, Assault, and Escalation, which were game modes designed to use, well, two things. The Stronghold Assault was designed to use the huge fortifications that Games Workshop had put out, like the macro cannon, the Aquila macro cannon. Remember that one?
Yeah, the Freedom Cannon.
The Freedom Cannon, the giant eagle dick gun. And the escalation was all about using super heavies in your battles, and it gave points for them. It had put all the rules out for a bunch of the different factions super heavies, and you could use them in escalation games. It still wasn't like, use this transcendent Catan in every game. It was hey, if you're playing an escalation mission, here's the rules and points for it.
7th edition also introduced the Lords of War slot, which is kind of where we're going with this.
Right. And I don't know about you, man, but like Lords of War in 7th edition, well, they're totally fucking broken.
Well, they weren't just broken, they were really uneven. Because you got a Shadow Sword, you got a Bane Blade, you got a Knight, or you got Ghazghkull Thraka. And you had there were special rules for a lot of these where, like, you'd give up victory points if someone damaged your Knight or whatever, or bringing it in would have it take some damage, which, was an okay attempt to balance things like a Knight or a Shadow Sword or whatever. But when you have orcs who are already pretty much a garbage army at this point, and they're kind of being further crippled by taking their best character just because he happens to share the same slot as these really powerful units, it was really uneven.
Yeah, you'd go up to a game and it'd be like, all right, I've got all these orcs and I've got Ghazghkull. And it's like, cool, I've got all this and I've got a Knight instead of Ghazghkull, who's a lot better than Ghazghkull, but's in the same slot. And it's like weirdly a similar amount of points.
Yeah.
No, Lords of War in 7th edition were a total clusterfuck. Like, I don't know about you, man, but every time I'd organize a game in 7th edition, which I like compared to 8th edition, I didn't do that much. It would always be like, all right, 2,000 points, no lords. Like that would be it. It would be whatever points level, no lords. And because lords were at this point only fun if both players had one.
Yeah.
And only fun if both players had good ones. Because you could take a Stampa in a game of 40k, right? You'd be paying up like 1,200 points for it, though. Like if you trick it out with all the fucking weapons, or the Lord of Skulls, like Skulldozer. It checked in without any upgrades at 888 points, which the corner number is 8.
They worked backwards from the point cost on that one.
Yeah, exactly. But it didn't make any sense because like it was nowhere near as good as like just a Knight, which was like 375 points or something. So it was like, it was very effective on the battlefield, the Lord of Skulls, but not to the amount of points that it ended up costing, nearly 1,000 points. So Lords in 7th were a problem, basically.
Yeah, they made for a lot of one-sided games where either you had enough anti-tank to stop them, or you didn't, and your army was useless, and it didn't make for a very back-and-forth game.
Yeah, and I remember going into Nova Narrative in 2014, came in, and one of my first games, there was a fucking Eldar Scorpion on the other side of the table. You remember that one?
Yeah.
Fired 2 large blast, strength D shots a turn. It was just like, fuck.
Fun.
Cool. You removed 2 of my tanks.
I think you played against something similar at Adepticon, and I just walked by the table and looked at you and you just looked up at me and just shook your head. Well,
I mean, that was in 7th edition, not this year at Adepticon, but the one before. I was playing against Warp Hunters that game.
That was it.
The fella had a bunch of Warp Hunters, which I didn't even know were a thing. Yeah, but then he educated me, Campbell. Educated me on the ways of the Warp Hunter. But now in 8th edition, Lords are, well, they didn't go anywhere, so they're not back. But they're
still here.
Way more balanced.
They are. They kind of came to the forefront of the meta in a big way with, Knights showing up as their Knights being fleshed out to be their own factions, which is crazy to have a whole faction of just Lords of War. And Shadow Swords being one of the Shadow Swords and other Baneblade variants, but especially them being such a mainstay of competitive guard lists, like the dreaded 3 Shadow Sword list that is, it's probably not fun to play, but still.
I've played against that. It's not that bad because it makes the game go very quickly.
That's part of the reason I'm taking Knights is so I can play games faster. But you also have big characters who I think are deserving of a Lord of War status, like Reboot Gilliman and Magnus the Red, everyone's favorite space weeaboo. And they kind of get brought into a similar power level to a lot of the knight equivalents these days.
Right, and it's very important. I think potentially the most important part of Lords of War in 8th edition is that they can be killed by anything. It might take a couple thousand las gun shots to take down a Stampa, but it's possible.
Exactly. It does level the playing field while there's still very powerful pivotal units that you can kind of rotate your entire strategy around. But it's been interesting to see how they've just gotten progressively more normalized over the past decade, because even a year ago, I was like, an all-knight army, that sucks. That's boring. I don't want to play against that. I don't want to play as that. And now I'm like, fucking knights right in my veins. Like, come on, give me more. Give me more gallantry.
No, that's a good point. Like, in 7th edition, you'd see a guy come to the table with like 4 knights, and I'd just be like, nah, I'm good. I'll wait for the next guy. Or at an event, you'd see 4 knights on the and you'd be like, oh fuck. But now in 8th edition, you see 4 knights on the table, and you're like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it. I remember last year at Nova, we did a 1,000-point game, and I went up against a fucking Stormlord in a 1,000-point game, and I won because he had put all of his eggs in one very large Gatling gun heavy basket. And I had a bunch of psychers and just smited it to death. I used mind bullets.
The halcyon days of smite spam.
Yeah, right. I think I had 5. I think I had an astropath and 4 Primaris psychers.
Good gravy.
I'm part of the problem, or at least I was part of the problem. But yeah, nowadays they're much more balanced, and it's fun to go up against them. I remember I played my friend Evan in a game of my guard versus his guard with a knight. And he just charged his knight up, and I was like, oh, fuck. And then I eventually killed it, and it blew up and killed half of my army. And I was like, oh, double fuck. But that's the cool thing. That's the cool thing about Lords, is that they're centerpiece models. Not just a centerpiece of an army, but they're a centerpiece of a battle. And the battle's going to swirl around them. When you bring out like a Shadow Sword or a Baneblade, your opponents can be like, I got to kill that fucking Baneblade. That thing's got to go down. Or a knight, towering over everything else on the battlefield. You're like, or a Wraith Knight is another great Lord of War centerpiece model. You're like, oh shit, that thing can do a lot of damage. Got to take care of that. So it's such a great visual thing to have on the battlefield. Which, I wanted to talk about as we go through this, like the Lords of War we have in our collections, and like what they mean to us and everything. And so I want to start with my first one, my Shadow Sword. I love this. The model is good. It's a plastic model. It's the Baneblade chassis Lords of War aren't the most flashy and big and tall or whatever. But I like the utilitarian design of them, and the Shadow Sword and the Baneblade I have. I love bringing them out there because they match my tanks in their paint scheme. And when you put a bunch of tanks and another huge tank like right in the middle, and you're just out there, you're like, yeah. Check it out.
Don't talk to me or my treaded sons ever again. I was gonna say, you said the Baneblade isn't that big, but still like the size of Shaq's shoe. Like,
it only barely fits in a Dawn of War deployment zone. It's about a foot long. The Baneblade is, yeah. So what was your first?
If you were listening, which so rude of you, it was the Shadow Sword also.
I know it was the Shadow Sword, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your Shadow Sword. God damn it.
So the Shadow Sword was my first. It is for my Valhallans, the Valhallan 32nd rifles, and it is effectively named the Tsar. And I probably used it like 3 times in 7th edition. Once at the Philly Apocalypse game with you, once in just a big game Dylan and I had where it was my Shadow Sword and his knight, because I got to borrow it for the day, versus his Orc Super Heavies, and we had a Garden Orc battle around it, and that was really fun. And it's cool. I love building it. I love painting it. And I'd like to use it at some point, because if you listen to the last episode, my dad used it against me and made my tanks go away very quickly.
You never give the Shadow Sword to your dad.
Let the Wookiee win. What was your second? Second Lord of War?
Mine's my Baneblade, and I actually like the Baneblade more than the Shadow Sword.
Really?
In a model sense, I think the Baneblade is one of the coolest looking tanks Games Workshop has ever produced.
11 barrels of hell
with the turret, the high turret like that, and it's like got these little Gothic accents on the command deck. of this thing. It's huge. It's covered in guns, and it fucking rules. It's not the best tank, rules wise. It's way too expensive for what it does, but it is a lot of fun to put on the table, and you just get to roll a fuck ton of dice with this thing. The main cannon does 3d6 shots.
That rules.
Which when it's good, is real fucking good. And what I like to do is I like to combine that with my Trojan, so it's rolling around with rerolls to hit with a main gun that fires 3d6 shots, which is just, it's mean, but fuck it. When I use it, it's I'm not going to bring a Baneblade into a 2,000 point game unless it's a like chill, fun game. But you play a 2,500 point game, it's like you bring the Baneblade out and you're like, oh yeah, you guys are in for it now.
Well, that's also being like, cool, there's like 800 points less of guardsmen I have to set up before the game starts.
Yeah, that's another good point, yeah.
That's actually why I gave my dad the Shadow Sword in that game. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want to take out more fucking guardsmen.
So you have more, much, I'm sorry, you have many more Lord's War than I do. So why don't you take a minute to talk about your knights?
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll just skip over the fact that I have Gazgul Thraka.
Oh, you do? That's right.
Yeah, because he's not a Lord of War anymore, but it's a cool model anyway.
Oh, is he HQ now?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. I actually don't have the Orc Index, but whatever. I'll get the Orc Codex when it comes out. But yeah, he's cool. He's fine. Whatever. But Knights are really the next big thing I have for Lords of War, obviously. And I started with the Knight Crusader because I got the Renegade box set when that came out. I got that at Nova, actually. And that again, the kit's great. The Knight Crusader, I used them like 3 times in 7th edition. You were there for, I think, 2 of those games. And I think one was Nova. They were all Nova and the Philly Apocalypse game. Yeah. But I've gotten to use them a few times in 8th edition, both with the Index at Nova last year and in the new Codex just this one time. And it's, like I was saying, it's what it should feel like to play Warhammer. Things die when I shoot them. And, it's kind of where I get to all Lords of War not created equal, because when I pick up an Armiger Warglaive, I'm like, this is a cool model, but this is a quote Lord of War that costs 160 points. This costs as much as a tactical squad. Yeah,
I think, and I don't know because I don't know, but I think that they did that for just to keep every unit in the Knight Codex a Lord of War. It
purely is the reason why. It's so they can make the FOC, whatever, detachments make a little more sense. And I'm okay with it. I get it. But it's just, when a Lord of War can be a little Armiger or a Warhound Titan, it's kind of like, all right, that's a slot with some variety in it.
Or a fucking Warlord Titan.
Exactly. So, yeah, I haven't gotten to explore the full Knight Codex yet. My Valiant is sitting right here with their arms off and their armor plates drying outside because I primed them earlier today. But I'm loving how the army plays. I like how their centerpiece is the battlefield. I like how much tension they draw. And I do have one more Lord of War.
What's that?
Who is Reboot Gilliman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you do. You have the 30k reboot, right?
Yes, it's the 30k reboot that Forge World showed off on their Facebook page a while ago. As a fucking humble brag because I'm an egocentric asshole. Yeah, anyway, sorry. I used him a bunch of times actually when I was at AdeptCon when I played with my Heresy Ultramarines in both the 40k and 30k events. I've used him in local games against other 30k guys when I was still doing that more. And he affects the battlefield in a big way because he doesn't just fight well, he supports the guys around him, which I like a lot. And again, it is a big centerpiece model, while not being one quite as hard to transport as a knight. But the way Horus Heresy, the perfect game, does it is Lords of War can only take up 25% of your points allowance, which I think was necessary in the previous rule set when not everything could damage everything. Because right now, if a guy shows up with a knight in a 1,000-point game, you're like, all right, if this is a Maelstrom mission, you're boned. If this is an objective mission, you're boned. And also, I can probably chip this guy down to, if not kill the knight, at least slow it down.
Yeah, make it effective, yeah.
Yeah, well, in 7th edition, you'd be like, cool, I'm just going to bounce off your, all your shit, so... Yeah, so Lords of War it's a vast array of unit choices, and it's been really cool to see how it's changed over the past decade or so.
Right, and I'm working on my Astraeus, and by all reports, the Astraeus is terrible on the battlefield. It needs about a 200-point price drop to be competitive with even just a Baneblade. But I like the model, and it's a Primaris thing, and it's going to look really cool when it's done. And I don't think a whole lot of people have them, so it'll be nice to put that out on the table and be like, hey, this is Nestreus. This is what it does. Oh, it does nothing? Oh, yeah. Should people go out and build and paint Lord of War if they don't have one yet?
I mean, it's all down to personal preference, man. Because like I grew up playing BattleTech and MechWarrior, so a knight army is near and dear to my heart. I also grew up playing. If you ever play, there's a classic Steve Jackson game called Ogre, and
I remember Ogre. Yeah,
it was recently released as a way too big box set.
Yeah, it was with a cardboard, little cardboard guys, and it was a giant. Yeah, one of my friends bought it and like tried to get me to play it, but I just didn't end up doing it. But he like showed me the box, and it was like a fucking like suitcase the size.
Yeah, and it weighed like 30 pounds because it was basically an entire tree worth of cardboard. But that game is typically one giant tank versus an army of infantry, anti-tank guns, and tanks and so on. And you can very much do an Ogre 40k game if you take a Baneblade versus the equivalent points value of a different army or what have you.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that asymmetric matchup. And now that there's things like the degrading profiles and anything wounding anything, I really love that you can kind of recreate that in a fairly easy way. As for should everyone get a super heavy, I think it'd be cool if every army had one, although it might feel kind of shoehorned, like with the quote Summer of Flyers unquote that never fucking happened, if you remember those old rumors.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, no, I think if you're hemming and hawing on it, go for it. Like there's Trader Knights, there's regular Knights. Greggles has that awesome Orc Knight he converted.
Yeah, that you can't use, but it looks so fucking cool.
Unbound.
Yeah, you can use it in open play, yeah, I guess, or narrative play.
Yeah, and honestly, if I was ever in a situation where I got to actually play a friendly game with him, I would totally let him use it.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, he's a great dude. But
I've done it before. He's like, I want to use my Orc Knight. And I'm like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, dope. But yeah,
I'll blow that up with my Shadow Sword, no problem.
It's also fun because every single one is a project. Because like a Squad Tactical Marines, I'm like, I'll work on that for a bit. A Rhino, I'll work on that for a bit. But every single Knight I do is a project in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because with mine, I'm also doing like different heraldry for everyone, different patterns in the carapaces. And it's so fun to customize everything. And after painting so many uniform ranks of stuff for both my Empire, for my Templars, for my 30k Ultras, what have you, being able to have every single thing be an individual and be an individual that'll actually have an impact on the battlefield is really refreshing.
Right. I would definitely say if you are on the fence about it, get one. They're so cool when they're done. Taking the time to paint one of those huge things can be a pain in the ass, but when they're done, they're so cool to have on the battlefield. And I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you because we spent a whole fucking episode segment doing it. We're naming your fucking knights, but I name all of my lords also. I think my Shadow Sword is the Steel Spectre. My Baneblade is xenophobic, and I am not sure about my Astreus yet, but I'm thinking about Shadowborn as the name for it.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I was going to call it Boys Don't Cry, but that works too.
Oh, no. It's called Love Will Tear Us Apart.
Laz will tear us apart.
Everybody go out, get Lord of War. They're rad. They're fun. In 8th edition. They're cool. Okay, Campbell. So we've talked about big giant models, and now we need to talk about big giant nerds in the 4th iteration of Fast Times at Terra High. It's Factor Fanfiction.
Chapter 4. Previously on Fast Times at Terra High. Why do you put an H in there? Whew. Anime is outlawed. Our intrepid band of heroes, led by Anime Club President Magnus, enlisted the help of Corvus Corax to infiltrate Principal the Emperor's office and retrieve the confiscated anime. But that fat idiot Lorgar opened the door to Principal the Emperor's golden throne, only to find him seated upon it, furious at the intrusion. The Anime Club president fled across the street, and guys followed him. It was the night of the homecoming dance at Terra High School, and things were strange. Nothing was normal, and nothing would ever be normal again. Magnus knew this because he wasn't stupid, but he didn't know the degree to which he knew it, which he was now finding out. The guys following him were Chad Valdor, Russ, and other guys from the football team. Russ was a bad boy with a mean streak and had been drinking since the dance started from the flask he brought in with him. Chad Valdor's full name was Constantine, but no one called him Constantine. Many people learned lessons about that. Chad taught those lessons with his fists, and that was the way things were at Terra High. Chad knew the ins and outs of the ways to trick the chaperones, and he was both Principal the Emperor's Golden Boy and the quarterback of the Terra High Golden Knights football team. So it was no surprise that knowing those things got him and Russ and the football team past the chaperones. That was just what Chad did, and he was famous for it, along with the other things. Magnus knew why this was happening, but he was powerless to stop it. Ever since that momentous and dire instant when they broke into the office of Principal the Emperor and he was already there, the writing had been on the wall. It was what it was. They were open season, like all anime was at Terra High School. Chad and Russ knew this and knew what they could do, without fear of repercussion. And even though Chad was dating Celestine, he didn't like the way that her younger sister Jessica looked at Magnus, which was even worse. There was a reckoning coming, and it came tonight, on the night of the homecoming dance. The problem was, Magnus was smart and fast, and he had someone with him that he wanted to protect. He didn't go to the homecoming dance because it was wise, but because it was the necessary thing. He knew the anime club needed to be there in the school's greatest moments of culture if the anime club wanted to make any credible claim to being important to the school, and so he went with Lorgar and Aramon. Within half an hour, Lorgar was gone though, and Magnus did not hold it against him because Lorgar was still traumatized from being yelled at by the principal. Soon it was just him and Aramon, even though when the girls asked to dance with them, Magnus told them this was not the time or place. It was Aramon who saw Chad and Russ strutting across the floor toward them after Magnus talked to Jessica, who was there, about anime, and it was Aramon who told Magnus that there were a lot of other guys behind him. They jumped into Magnus's car, an '88 Buick Prospero, which was okay, but it had a history.
Oh, wow.
The Prospero had borne the anime club to a dozen conventions in the club's storied history up and down the coast. Magnus asked Ferris Manus from shop class to look at it a couple weeks ago by cannily exchanging with him the entire series of Initial D burned on TBT. And Magnus said it was pretty good.
Ferris Manus is in shop class. Oh, is he? Okay. You know what? I'm more interested. I'm less interested in anime club and more interested in shop class, which is probably Ferris, Vulcan, and Fulgrim. And Fulgrim's got one of those like shitty cars with like the underglow and the giant fart can on it.
With like side skirts that are still primer gray.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. Please continue.
It's all right. With Chad and Russ bearing down behind them, Magnus slipped into the driver's seat and manually shifted into drive. "This is the work," he wisely told his younger brother Aramon in the back seat. "This is what we do when we're not doing the things they hate us for." His younger brother buckled up and nodded, but then behind him, there was the noise. There was no way Magnus could have known that Chad Valdor had gone to Fulgrim, known widely as the prettiest guy in school, and asked for an alliance. Magnus should have gone to Fulgrim, a Bishonen, first, and approached him with the full strength of anime. Fulgrim, the class valedictorian, was smart enough to appreciate its emphasis on beauty and grace over brute force. But Magnus didn't do that, and now he was reaping the reward as the cards fell where they may. As Magnus shifted Prospero to first gear, Chad roared up behind them in his golden Corvette Z07 their dad bought him, while Russ took up the other lane in his gunmetal F-150, covered with Norse runes that spelled out Pussy Wagon. Russ fucked, and it was important to him that everyone knew that. Editor's note, Russ did not actually fuck, and everyone knew that.
Oh my god.
Ooh. And then, swerving off the road onto the dirt and driving through it, was the great monster and the party wagon, the endless machine with power doors, a family vehicle that can see all of your children and has a hardened steel frame and 5-star crash rating to protect them, the Mini Van Halen. It was painted purple and gold with airbrush paintings of wizards and dragons on both sides. Ferris Manus and his shop class crew had ripped all of the undercarriage off and jacked up the hydraulics so that the minivan rode high, and on the roof, secured to it by bungee cords, was Eidolon from the school band, who was very weird. His hair looked like Skrillex, and he had his own band, which was dedicated to noise. There were large speakers rigged up behind him to play the noise coming out of his guitar, and when he leaned forward, almost over the windshield of the van, they spat fire. And sometimes, they spat fire at him when he didn't lean forward, which Eidolon screamed at. Magnus didn't like the look of that van at all. Magnus dodged and weaved with the Prospero, and eventually, a few miles outside of town, he looked in the rearview mirror and met his younger brother's eyes. Ahriman, he asked, do you trust me? Ahriman nodded because his older brother was the best and wisest guy he'd ever known about anime or anything else. Okay, Magnus said, buckle up. Ahriman was already buckled up, but he nodded. Then Magnus swerved the car off the road and straight through a gas station. Not the pumps, but the Quick Mart and garage of the gas station. He had seen this done before, Magnus thought, and the walls were weak. The Prospero slammed through the convenience store and into the garage, which was empty thanks to luck or fate. There were no airbags in the car, but Magnus was okay except for his nose. Ahriman had his seatbelt on, and he was fine. Magnus stepped out of the car and opened the door to Ahriman, then extended his hand. Come with me, my brother, he said. Ahriman took his hand just in time, as Russ's big rig crashed through the rest of the store, hitting some pumps as he did. Magnus and Ahriman fled out the back as the fire began to spread, and in the distance behind them they saw Chad Valdor's expensive muscle car start doing donuts in frustration because the quarterback didn't know where they were. That was when the Van Halen hit the gas station, with Eidolon playing fully, and everything exploded.
Sounds like Prospero really burned in that one.
Ooh! Nice, 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 nice.
Well, Rob, the chirurgeon, that was amazing. I can't wait for the 5th and final chapter of Fast Times at Terra High to be read on the next episode of the 40k Badcast in a couple of weeks. But it's time, Campbell, that we become the departure dudes and get the fuck out of town.
Yeah, but before we go, we got a lot of plugs to make, man.
Oh my God, so many plugs. We're like Elon Musk. Because he was bald. He was bald when he was like working with PayPal.
Oh, okay.
And now he has like a full head of hair.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say because we just left a couple $100,000 of garbage in Thailand and let someone else clean it up.
Yeah, no, that's something we're both guilty of also. Ooh, current events. Here we go, folks.
Woo!
They saved
hot takes.
Those Thai kids, they're good. Everything's good. Good
Let's
news in the
car in
world
space.
for once. Awesome. All right, what do we got?
True.
Who are we plugging? What are we doing?
Ooh, well, let's start off by getting in some of that sweet self-plug action. Ooh. Like every other podcast out there.
You love self-plugging.
Tell me about it. It's almost as much as Fulgrim does. Whew. Like every other podcast out there that isn't supported by Blue Apron, we now have a Patreon.
Ooh.
If you go to patreon.com/40k Badcast, you can see all our shit. We're recording bonus episodes for our Patreon supporters, where $5 a month gets you a monthly bonus episode where we just talk about fucking whatever, man. And commemorate that, we've also made the 40k Badcast t-shirt. Which is a very cool shirt that you probably shouldn't wear in public. By the time you listen to this, that bonus episode should be up, but if not, give it a bit and it'll be on there. We want to, this shit, we do a lot of research. Believe it or not, we actually do a good amount of research, a lot of editing, a lot of time recording, and we want to just kind of support ourselves through the podcast if we can. So if you want to give us $1 a month, that's sweet. If you want to give us $5 a month, you get the bonus content. If not, that's totally cool too. The Badcast will always be free. We're not changing that. We're not taking on sponsors, especially because we're burning bridges left and right. But there's going to be bonus episodes for all y'all who want to support us the most. And we would appreciate it if you do. If not, totally cool, man. Totally cool.
Campbell showed me the picture that we're using for the 420k Badcast t-shirt. And I can tell you guys right now that this shirt is the best shirt you've ever seen in your entire life, and is definitely worth it if you go get it. And it will be made of the similar highly flammable material that our current t-shirts are made. So if you like that, good for you.
That shirt and others can be bought at shop.spreadshirt.com/camtunes, where you can get your Badcast badge shirt or your Podcast Buddy Pal shirt. I don't have a term for it yet, but it's
Bud
there.
Shirt.
Budcast Bud shirt.
It's the Bud shirt. Come on.
Yeah,
Common now.
Not going there right this minute. But yeah, man, I appreciate if you do that. If not, that's cool too. Other than that, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at BrotherSRM. He's at DB_sleazy. You can check out what we're tweeting about, whether that is fucking sweet dunks on Elon Musk, if you didn't get enough of those here, or Dan bitching about baseball again, which I'm sure he's already doing right now as I'm talking.
Well, unfortunately, Campbell, Matt Wieters is back with the Nationals, who is the best catching prospect, not a prospect, but best catching option they have. And when Matt Wieters is your best catching option, then you've got a problem.
Speaking of Wieters, there's a strange man in my backyard who I'm probably going to ask about in a few minutes, but that's okay. He's not in my house, so I'm probably fine. Otherwise, you can review us on iTunes. It helps a lot with visibility, and it's cool if you do. And actually, most of the iTunes reviews are really fucking funny, so go ahead and review us there if you would care to. If not, also, totally fucking fine.
And don't forget, you can always email us at contact@40kbadcast.com with whatever the fuck you want. We love to see your model pictures. We love to see pictures of battles you're fighting. Warhammer battles, not like you're battling your wife over where the couch goes in your new living room. I don't need to know about that. If you want to share that, if you need to vent, that's okay. But I'm probably going to side with her, because if you listen to this show, you're probably a fucking moron.
If you do have personal battles you need to fight and you need the expertise of two dudes who have no idea what they're talking about, you can get at us. Contact at 40kbadcast.com.
Finally, listeners, thank you so much for listening to the show. We couldn't do it without you. We wouldn't do it without you. And we've had a ton of great feedback lately from a lot of really nice people. And I just want to take the time to thank you for listening, and thank you for reaching out to us and engaging with us, because we love it when it happens.
We really do. It always brightens my day to open up my inbox, or our inbox, I guess. Just I heard from a guy I actually didn't get to play with at Adepticon last year, but I got to talk to him for a bit, and he's been listening to the show since, and it was cool, man. I really like making those connections, and he actually knows the Stiffen Bros, because this world is super small.
It's very, very tiny, which I'm sure will never come back to bite us in the ass. Campbell, can you take us out on a high note with a wonderful, inspiring quote?
Fear not what you see. That which cowers in the Emperor's light is more terrifying still.
You know that's right, motherfuckers. We're the 40k Badcast. We're bad at 40k. You can too, and we will catch you on the flip.